everybody, this is Katje. Welcome to my YouTube video channel. This evening I want to begin by showing you this chiffon dress, which is in kind of an abstract floral pattern. I purchased this dress at Loft, or the local store here, but it also can be found nationwide. This is a kind of summery dress that I'm complementing with one of my Michael Kors purses, this kind of clutch purse. I also have some brown high heels on, or pumps actually, with hose. So this is a kind of a comfortable summer outfit. This dress is very nice. It's versatile. It can be used for a lot of different things. So let me model that. Here's the print pattern, so you can get a good look at that. You can see, as I said, it's kind of an abstract floral pattern. So let me move over here so you can get the effect from this side. I hope everybody's doing well this evening, and I look forward to talking with you about something that has recently come up. But first let me model the dress and give you the back here. So what I'd like to talk about this evening is, and I don't want to go on at length about this too long, but what I want to do tonight is I want to respond to something that I came across on YouTube recently. There's a series of videos by Bishop Robert B. Barron. He's an American bishop in the Catholic Church. So I've looked at some of these videos. He's discussed everything from Flannery O'Connor to some recent movies, but he also discusses Catholic social teaching. And I recently came across a video by Bishop Barron that's addressing the issue of gay marriage, and I would like to respond to some of the points that he makes about that. I'm not going to get into the specifics of that issue because he really doesn't do that either. What I'm going to address is kind of the general tenor of his remarks. So Bishop Barron in the video, and you can look it up on YouTube, you can find it. I'm not going to post a link to it here. You can find it if you're interested. He puts this discussion into the context of a kind of general reflection on what he calls the deterioration or the decay of moral discourse. This is something that's a theme taken up by the philosopher, an American philosopher, I believe he's American, Alistair McIntyre, has discussed this. And so this is something that Bishop Barron discusses, and he brings this in particular into connection with the issue of gay marriage. So what I want to do is discuss 3 points that he makes about this very briefly, and I want to respond to each point. Now, the first thing that Bishop Barron says is that he notices, following McIntyre's analysis, he notices that a lot of times, even though McIntyre may not be discussing the particular issue of gay marriage, he talks about the tendency to shy away from moral arguments. And Bishop Barron says this, he uses an example in connection with the recent Supreme Court decision that legalized gay marriage. And it was something that Justice Elena Kagan had said in her decision to the effect that, well, she doesn't really want to discuss or consider moral arguments for or against a particular case before the court. And of course, Bishop Barron thought this was really kind of ridiculous. You know, he kind of scoffed at it and said, well, look, the whole issue is a moral issue. Whether, if this is discrimination against gay people by not allowing them to marry, or same-sex couples, or maybe it could be discrimination by some people, according to some people, against religious individuals who don't want to recognize that and want to avoid doing so because of their religious beliefs. Bishop Barron's point was, well, Kagan is being inconsistent here because she's not treating it as a moral issue. She doesn't want to, and it obviously is. Now, I don't know exactly what the context was of Justice Kagan's remarks, but I kind of have a pretty good idea of what she was trying to say, and with all due respect to the bishop, I don't think he's addressing it. So, if a case comes before the Supreme Court or any other court of law in a democratic society like ours, in a pluralistic society where we have people who come from a number of different faiths, Christian, some are Catholic, some are Christian but not Catholic, some are Jewish but not Christian, they may be Muslim, or many people don't have any religious beliefs at all. They're agnostic or they're atheists. So we're living in a pluralistic society. Now, if there are going to be arguments, and in particular moral arguments about a particular issue, including an issue before the Supreme Court, then those moral arguments, in order to have a wide appeal and to have persuasive power in a pluralistic society where not everybody shares the same religion or even any religion at all, those arguments had better not draw upon premises that are taken from a particular religious tradition. So if somebody says, well, look, marriage is between one man and one woman, because that's what the Bible says according to Christian orthodoxy, well, that's a religious argument. And the premises of that argument are being drawn from a particular religious tradition, even a particular interpretation of it, that not everybody in this country shares. And so immediately, that kind of moral argument needs to be set aside because it will not have broad appeal or persuasive power in a pluralistic society where not everybody shares the same religious commitments or even any religious commitments. I think that's what, or suspect, that that's what Justice Kagan was saying, and I don't think that Bishop Barron did justice to that point. So that's the first thing I want to say. Now, another thing that Bishop Barron points out in connection with the decay of moral discourse or moral argument in the country is he notices that a lot of times in the discussion of gay marriage, people will point to statistics and say, well, maybe 50 years ago, something like maybe 20% or even less of people, probably much less, would have approved of gay marriage, but now the majority of Americans really think that gay marriage should be legal. And so Bishop Barron is saying, well, look, the problem with this is that whether something is morally justified or not is not a matter of majority opinion. And he's right about that. Just because the majority of people believe that sacrificing Christians to lions would be okay, that doesn't mean that it's morally justified. Or if the majority of people backed somebody like Adolf Hitler, well, that doesn't mean that Adolf Hitler is morally justified as a leader. So I think that Bishop Barron is right about that. But the problem I see with his remarks is he doesn't really elaborate, and I don't recall nobody particular comes to mind who has argued for gay marriage, at least no public figure or any serious argument that I heard in the run-up to the Supreme Court decision, either from the justices or from anybody else discussing the issue in the media or elsewhere. I don't remember anybody appealing to popularity or majority opinion in order to justify legalizing gay marriage. I just don't remember that. That would be a fallacy. It's known as the fallacy of appeal to popularity, but I don't really recall anybody making that argument. And personally, I support gay marriage, but I would never argue for it by appealing to majority opinion because I agree that that's a fallacy. Nor do I think that any serious defender of gay marriage would appeal to polls or statistics or any kind of majority opinion to justify the morality of gay marriage. So I think that Bishop Barron underdescribes that case. And while we're on the subject of fallacies, I think we also need to be careful that, there's a danger on the right, or for people who oppose gay marriage, to say, well, look, it's a time-honored tradition that only one man and one woman, at least outside of polygamous societies, only one man and one woman have been allowed to marry. That's a tradition. It's been done that way for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. Well, that may be so, but that doesn't automatically justify making the conclusion that gay marriage is immoral. To use another example that Bishop Barron gives, just because the majority of people at one time supported slavery doesn't mean that slavery is morally justified. Well, similarly, just because slavery was a tradition that goes all the way back to ancient Greece and in some form or another has been around with us for thousands of years, that hardly justifies slavery as a morally acceptable practice. That would be a fallacy known as appeal to tradition. So while we're worried about people on the left maybe making appeals to popularity or to majorities, we also should be equally concerned about people on the right who are making illegitimate appeals to tradition. So that's the second point I would make. Now what's the last point? The last point is Bishop Barron says that he wants to avoid sort of like appeals to empathy or emotional appeals of the following sort when it comes to discussing this issue. So for example, sometimes people will say, well look, I didn't know until my uncle came out, or my brother, or my father maybe came out, or somebody in my family, or some friend of mine came out, and so now when I see that, I actually know some gay people, and so that makes me more likely to support their having a right to marry in the way that straight couples do. Now, Bishop Barron rightly observes that simply because I know good people who happen to be gay, that doesn't justify gay marriage by itself. That would be an appeal to empathy or to good character, and that by itself certainly wouldn't justify gay marriage. But again, 2 points here. One is I don't really recall anybody in my knowledge trying to argue for the moral acceptability of same-sex marriages by appealing to the fact that, well, look, a lot of people whom I know and respect are gay, and so they should be allowed to marry. I don't remember anybody making that argument, again, in the run-up to the Supreme Court issue, or within the Supreme Court, or anywhere around this issue in the media. I haven't heard that. I certainly have never argued that way. I think that there are better reasons for supporting gay marriage. For example, I think that from a purely legal standpoint, which also has some moral power in a universal way because it's not limited to a particular religious tradition, we do want to respect equal protection under a reasonable interpretation of that. We don't want a society, a democratic society, in which some people are treated differently and are deprived certain rights, like the right to file joint tax returns, the right to inherit each other's property, or for the survivor of the couple to inherit the property that's jointly owned without having to pay high taxes on it. That's something that straight married couples were able to do for many, many years, and gay couples were not allowed to do that until the Supreme Court decision legalized same-sex marriage. And so up to that point, gay people were being treated differently from straight people, and that looks like, on the surface of it, although the legal issue can get very complex, and there are differences of opinion about it, that can look like a violation of equal protection of the Constitution because certain people are being treated differently from others for no apparently good reason. So I think that these are some things that Bishop Barron, I wish that he had discussed more carefully in his contribution. And I think it's important for those of us who are people of faith, like myself, who don't agree with Bishop Barron about this, to present an alternative here, because not everybody who is a Christian or a Roman Catholic would agree with Bishop Barron that same-sex marriage should not be legalized as a matter of public policy in a pluralistic society. Many of us would disagree with him there, and we would also have some serious qualms about some of the points that he made in that video, which you can look at if you're interested. I don't think that just because somebody is opposed to gay marriage, that automatically makes the person a bigot or homophobic. I think that many people are, but I don't think that it automatically makes somebody that. So I don't want to jump to conclusions. And I certainly applaud Bishop Barron for discussing the issue honestly and forthrightly. I just don't agree with a lot of what he had to say, or I think it was under-described, and it needed to be given a little more careful consideration. So that's what I wanted to talk about this evening. And again, this is my chiffon abstract floral pattern dress. I hope you like it. And thank you for spending some time with me this evening. I hope to make another video in about a week or so, but until then, this is Katje Eckhart, and as always, I wish everybody a safe, an enjoyable, and a restful good night. Please be good to each other. Take care of each other. I love all of you and hope all of you have a very good evening. Thank you again for joining me. Bye-bye.